welcome to the Golden Hour. I am Golden Duffy, your host, and I have an amazing guest, Candace Mitchell, with me today. Welcome, Candace.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so happy to have you here. This is the third time Candace has been on here. So if you want more of Candace, look back in my earlier episodes, because I feel such a strong connection to what you teach. And, Candace is she's one of these bright lights in the world that is empowering people to really acknowledge the power that they have to create. And what I love about you so much is that you've got the tips, the tricks, the tools to help people to fire differently, to help create different pathways in their brain, to help acknowledge, what we've been through, right? Like we've all got these things we've been through, these traumas and life experiences we've been through, but not to allow them to define you, but instead to allow them to up-level you. So welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. And I love how you said that. Allow your history to up-level you. Yes.
Yes, because it's all an invitation, right? If we can step out of victimhood and we can step into our power and acknowledge the fact that we have choices, and we have a choice about the way we feel, and we have a choice about the way we think, and we have a choice about the way we believe, then we can take every single thing that's happened to us and turn it into a gift, a strength, and new knowledge, new wisdom, and new information that's going to allow us to propel our life experience.
I call it a dark gift in my coaching.
Yeah.
If you can go through a dark time and find the gift that came out of it, it's your dark gift. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes there's no other way you could have received that gift of that learning that got you the strength and resilience.
And that's absolutely true. And the cool thing about expansion and growth is when you get to the place of acknowledging that when you're in the darkness, when something comes to you and it's not optimal and you can go, something good is going to come from this. I feel like the trajectory of our suffering is not as intense. We don't have to suffer through these things. We can actually have faith through them instead.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so with you on that. So we're going to have a great conversation today. I just know that. And I get really excited when we talk because I just feel like I expand and grow. And I know our audience does as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about ego today. And I don't know that I've ever really had a conversation in depth about ego, but I'm feeling very different about my own ego. In fact, people look at ego and they think it's a bad thing. So can you just share a little bit I'll share a little bit about my journey with that recently, but like what actually is ego? Like how can people understand ego to a deeper level?
So when I talk about ego, I am speaking of the psychological ego of the self-protection, because anytime we feel a threat to our safety, which embarrassment can feel like a threat to safety, right?
Totally.
The ego will come in, and that's where the embarrassment, shame, that's where we try to put up a mask or have false bravado. We're afraid to ask for help because people might think we're dumb. That's all work of the ego, trying to protect us and keep us safe from those uncomfortable feelings. However, being able to develop a different relationship with ego such that when ego comes up, you can go, oh, ego's here to protect me. What's really going on? And being able to stay in your true authenticity and not let ego take over, that's the vulnerability that is the seat of power.
Wow. That's really cool. So when we're in moments like that, where we kind of lose, I look at it as when we lose presence and consciousness of who we are, it's like we get self-conscious, right? Like we get conscious of ourselves. And it's that idea of like being afraid of looking stupid, right? In those particular moments, what can we do? I mean, is that part of the process to be in moments like that? Or can you refine it where you're not experiencing as much of that? And I'm asking for myself as well as everybody else.
So on this point, I can speak to my own experience. The more that I intentionally allow myself to feel the discomfort and not let the ego take over, even being awkward enough to be like, wow, this is awkward for me right now. Just give me a moment. That vulnerability, that authenticity really helps me deal with it. And it seems like it has lost the ability to impact me so heavily. So now when it comes up, it's just like a little tap tap instead of a whole overshadowing thing, you know?
So if you can, in a moment of awkwardness, actually call out the awkwardness and take a moment to yourself,
Mhm.
you'll interrupt the programming.
Yes,
Well, that's
because it puts light on it. So it's no longer a behind the scenes thing that's happening on autopilot. Now there's light on it, and you're consciously choosing to in or out of the
right,
ego.
right, right. So you're not in that subconscious programming. I had
Yep.
such a silly experience, but it's totally coming up right now because this has been one of my questions. So I had to return some chairs that I purchased online, and I went to a place and they wanted $250 to package them. And I paid like $300 for them. So I left that place. I went to a different place and I made the mistake of telling the gentleman there that they wanted $250 to put it in a box. And so he wanted to box it without me being there, but his partner came out and started boxing them. So they boxed it right in front of me. It took 5 minutes of boxing and tape. And he looked at me and he said, "How much do you want to pay for that?" And I got caught off guard and I went into my self-conscious, like, feeling of, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to offend him. But he was playing a game with me. Like, I was like, well, how much does it cost? And he started in about the overhead of his business and the box and the tape. And I was so angry afterwards. I ended up paying $75, which was way better than 250. But I was so angry afterwards because I thought he played me. I felt played, and I felt like, why couldn't I have in that moment said, "You mean the 5 minutes it took you to put that in a box? How much is that worth to me?" But I got so convoluted by the whole thing. And I was like, I literally felt like I went self-conscious instead of being in my power and being like, dude, come on. Like, that took you 5 minutes. But it was awkward and I was on the spot. So I wonder what would have happened if I would have just said, just a second. And I was able to kind of come back into my power and be like, well, that took you 5 minutes. So he lost my business for life, but lesson learned. But I went into the whole, oh my gosh, I was totally not in my power or in my like presence of consciousness of what I really wanted to say.
So is it okay if I offer something to
Please, I would
you, like
love to because
in
this has been
coaching
like
kind of
bugging
manner?
me. Yeah.
So when you were worried about what he might think or feel or being offended, that was totally your ego trying to manage
Yeah.
somebody else's perception, which is not our job. Our job is to be true to ourselves, right?
Yes.
So you're right as far as you gave your power away in that moment.
Yep.
And then afterwards, when you were angry at yourself, that was your ego. Yeah, that was your ego
Yeah.
asserting itself, proving to yourself that you were not authentic, that you are not assertive, that you're not capable, which, yeah, that takes you back to sticking with whatever limiting belief that you have that might be in there.
Yeah.
That's not self sabotage.
Ah, that's so good. So anytime, this is really an interesting conversation. Anytime someone has social anxiety or social awkwardness, they're being powered up by the ego, would you say?
I would say yes. And I would also say that they have like the majority of the time, an internal dialogue that is very negative and judgmental.
Hmm.
And therefore, because what we put out comes back to us for one thing, but also what we perceive as reality goes through our lens of reality. It's a cycle. So if
Right.
we're constantly judging others in a negative capacity, of course we perceive judgment coming back to us from others, even though it's pure projection. For us, it's reality. And
Right.
that is the ego protecting us from the unknown because we're all afraid of the unknown.
Right.
So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. All right. So let's dive into self sabotage as far as like the alignment of ego and self sabotage. What can you speak to about that?
Well, the ego is here to protect us from the unknown. When we feel threats to our safety or comfort, I should say,
Comfort.
because our ego has just gotten out of hand for whatever reason. It used to protect us from, like, monsters and
Hmm.
threats to our survival. Now it just perceived judgment. We're like, ah.
Right.
So the self-sabotage comes in with that. It's almost like a cognitive bias because if we have a limiting belief that's like in our core and we try to do something outside of that, we're trying to, no, I don't want to use the word try. We're
Yeah.
intentionally expanding,
Yep.
all right?
Yep.
That cognitive dissonance that comes up against that limiting belief causes discord and it
Right.
can feel uncomfortable. So the ego comes in to save the day and provide opportunity to be right about that limiting belief so that cognitive dissonance can go away and we can feel comfortable again.
Right. Because that will keep you from actually getting out of your comfort zone and doing things that are out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Oh, discomfort? Let me come save the day. Let me help you sabotage this so you can be right that you're not capable. And
Uh,
then you can simmer down and feel better about being complacent. Yes.
that's really good. That's really, really good. Oh, that's so fantastic. It makes me think I'm actually in an acting class right now, which is like, it's so cool. It's actually called Living Truthfully Under Imaginary Conditions.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so a lot of the reason why people take this class, so I'm taking the class just because I wanted to expand. I thought it was a really just, part of honing my craft. And I don't think I want to be an actress, but I do love acting. Like I just find some excitement in that, like becoming a character and aligning with that. But a lot of the people in that class actually are taking the class because they have social anxiety. They want to learn how to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, right? So when
Yes.
it comes to self, it's so interesting because when you're in a class like that and you've got all these people that you don't know and it's very uncomfortable and you have to do these kind of crazy things like act out and say things and do things. um, I was sitting there just looking around the room and you could feel people's energy, like you could feel the self-consciousness. And I don't really have that anymore, thank goodness. Like I think the practice makes you comfortable, right? Like after we do something for a long time. But it's so interesting to watch people. And it's one of the things that I feel really passionate about freeing people of, because life is so much better when, like before, when I would take a class like this, or I would do something like, I used to go to networking events all the time. I would have all this anxiety, right? And now I go to class and I'm excited about it because I've labeled it differently, but I feel different about it. But what can we say to people that really, because I do feel like this is a huge thing, especially after the last few years of our life. What do we say to people? I watched my kids go through major social anxiety after they were home for so long. And now they are the brightest lights and the most social, and they have no trouble talking to strangers, but it's because they got out of it and through it that they were
Yes.
able to do that. So would you say it's just doing it, or is there an easier way to navigate it?
Well, just doing it is the fastest way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so every time that we come up against it and we walk through, I call it walking through the fire.
Yeah.
So when we do something different that causes that cognitive dissonance and we don't let the ego take over, we walk through the fire instead, we create new neurons. Like we literally change our brain.
Yeah.
And then this becomes our new normal after we do it a few times. And if you really want to reinforce it, and there's scientific evidence that this works, after you walk through that fire, call somebody who loves and supports you and celebrate the win with them. And when they give you that positive feedback and you get to celebrate it, that strengthens the neuron so that it's more easily accessed. Next time you're in that uncomfortable position, it'll be more comfortable.
Wow. So it solidifies it
Yes.
because it's contributing to the whole process.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
And
Um,
that is the easiest, fastest way is do it on purpose and then celebrate it with somebody that you trust afterwards.
but as far as like being in it, is there an easier way to be in it?
So I'm going to give you this example and I'll try to be, but
Yeah.
stop me if I get carried away.
Okay.
So I was an invisible child because of all the trauma, and
Hmm.
I grew into be an invisible adult. But I would get so frustrated when people didn't see me or hear me. And then when I would have a chance to be seen and heard, I would just shut down. Anxiety would be so bad, I'd break out in a sweat and turn red, and I'd be like, and I would avoid opportunities to be seen and heard, therefore being right about my identity, right?
Right. Yep.
So I, on purpose, started doing karaoke because when you have a microphone, everyone's looking at you and you're seen and heard. Good job, bad job, doesn't matter.
No matter what. Yes.
So when I first started doing it, it didn't matter that I wasn't doing it well. It just mattered that I was doing it.
Right.
And then after I got
Imagine it was
comfortable,
hard. It was hard at first. Like it was one of
oh
those.
my gosh, it was so hard. Yes.
Yeah. But
And then,
that's where we learn and grow, right? Like if we're always trying to avoid the hard, then we're surpassing all of the lessons that actually could expand, grow, and enhance our life experience.
absolutely, that's how we gain strength and resilience. You do the hard thing.
Yeah.
So after I started the karaoke, and I would do easy songs, and when I got comfortable there, I would do harder songs. And then I would let the KJ pick a song for me that he thought would be in my range that I had never performed before.
Oh my goodness.
Like it just levels and levels. And then now I can sing completely sober at full voice, whatever song.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, I've been doing this for 10 months.
Wow. So before you go and do this performance, what's your state before you do it? Because I'm sure there was a journey that you took to be where you are right now. So did you go from like total fear and anxiety and just, where you just make yourself completely miserable before something, which is so unnecessary? Yeah.
Yeah. I would actually be physically sweating from the nervousness.
Yeah.
And I would be so tense that I couldn't even breathe correctly to even sing. So my first couple of times I was like almost squeaking and I sounded like, breathy because I really felt like I couldn't breathe.
Right.
But then I was like, all right, work on the breathing from the diaphragm because I know this, right?
Yep.
And then that ironically calmed the anxiety down when I would breathe correctly.
Yep.
And then it was just all a process and it just setting the neurons and yeah.
And then every time it probably got better.
Yeah.
To the point now, what is it like on a day you have to go sing karaoke?
Well, I just went to karaoke last night.
Uh-huh.
And I sang like Patsy Cline, Your Cheating Heart.
Nice.
And I sang it full voice and I sang it the way that I sing it in the shower or the car. And I got the loudest applause after I was done. And I was like, okay, I must have did okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Because you're in your power. You're letting that gift like flow through you. There's no resistance. I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of the social anxiety, all of that stuff, it shows up as resistance to what we're doing.
So the resistance is the ego protecting us.
Right.
The ego shows up all kinds of ways.
Right.
If you can start to recognize all the different ways it shows up, ego can be your friend that shows you, hey, look at this opportunity you have to do something different.
Right. Right. But is the ego always, it feels this way to me, like it's always kind of giving us the problems to work on or the dissatisfaction?
It doesn't give it to us.
Mm-hmm.
It protects us from them, the problems.
Yeah.
And so if you pay attention to all the different ways it offers protection, then you can look underneath what it's protecting you from and see the actual issue.
Interesting. Okay. So that dissatisfaction, like, because I've noticed this, it's very easy for us to get into dissatisfaction, right? Like that's almost like a societal programming to focus on the problems, to talk about the dramas, to just perpetuate whatever's going wrong in the world. I very much protect myself from that, to the point where people will say news things and I'm just like, I got nothing. I got nothing.
So I protect myself from that as well.
Yeah.
It seems like people don't know how to be intimate with each other, like authentic and vulnerable and connected in that space that's true intimacy.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so they hotwire a relationship by having similar complaints.
Ah, interesting.
And I call it hot wiring, like you would hot wire a car. Like
Yeah,
it'll get the relationship started, but you're not going to go that far.
interesting. Oh, wow. So it's like you're making a connection to something that's more superficial than
Hmm.
if you were actually like honest and truthful and vulnerable.
Which, if you think about it, is the ego protecting us from being vulnerable.
Man, this is so enlightening, especially like when I talk to people, and I've been trying to be a little more cautious about giving advice that I'm not being asked for.
Ah,
But I was
yes.
even just in a conversation a little while ago with someone, and I said, well, you should tell him how you feel so that you're not recreating from the issues that he's had in the past. And she's like, no, I'll just go quiet. And I was like, all right, well, that's one way. But going quiet, all that means is you're pushing your feelings down and they're going to show up, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, avoiding conflict can be the ego protecting you from feeling powerless because you haven't won in the past. So then you get to be right that you have no power by giving your power away by going quiet.
Right, right. Wow. Is that a self fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
But it validates the identity of that core belief.
right, right. So if you were to like kind of strip that layer, is the best way, is the best route to interrupting that cycle to, is it vulnerability, honesty?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's vulnerability. And I mean vulnerability like confront that thing. Let
Yeah.
it fly in the face of your core belief and let that core belief shift because you stood in that vulnerability.
Right. Right. And
That's
that's
where confidence comes from because then you know, oh, I have my own back. I can do anything that I decide. I
right.
can create literally my personality and be the person I want.
Oh, that's amazing. So then there's no, it feels like recently I've just felt like there's no agenda, where you're just like, so in my acting class, they call it objective, and how every person you talk to and every conversation you have, everyone always has an objective, right? Like there's, whether it's to be loved or to end the conversation or to be right. Or so I'm constantly asking myself, like, what's my objective and what might their objective be? Because if we can clarify that, then we can kind of get on the same page where it's like, I was thinking about my daughter recently, and she calls me a lot. We live together, but she calls me several times a day when she's at work, when she has a break, on her way home, like, I'm going to see you in
That's
15
sweet.
minutes. Right. So what's her objective? It's to connect. It's to feel loved. What's my objective? To end the conversation because I got stuff going on and I'm doing stuff. Right. And I'm like, oh man, if I could align my objective with her and satisfy that connection instead of trying to run from it, how much better is our relationship going to be? And that's not like conceding to her objective and what she wants, but like, what do we all want? Like, if I was to really think about my objective, is it really just to get stuff done? Or is it to have loving, deep connections with my family?
Well,
That's our objective.
so I may be out of line here because
No,
I'm going to
please
speak
come.
out of
This is, I started this.
So what I know about you,
Yeah.
your objective in life is to love.
Yeah.
So your daughter looking for that connection with you and you're busy doing things to give that love, through your work,
Yeah.
but you can do both.
I can do both. I can, and I can do it better, I think. Having this acknowledgement of it, like you said, like once you face your vulnerability, once you acknowledge your truth, like what's going on really with you, then you can work with it. But if you don't acknowledge it, it's just this underlying pinning in your life that you're
Right.
constantly trying to satisfy. That was good. That was good.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you're busy, you can say, I love you so much
Yeah.
and I'm so busy. Can I call you back when I'm done with this? And then call her back and she will feel loved because you remember to call her back.
Absolutely. And the awareness really came because she called me. She was driving home from work the other day and she called me, and I was doing something on the computer, of course. And I kind of rushed her off the phone, and she got into a car accident that day. And
Oh
yeah,
no.
like I mean, it is the most beautiful story. Like she hydroplaned. It was raining really hard. She hydroplaned There were no cars coming. She crashed into the wall, no injuries. The airbag didn't go off. There's a bridge. She was on a bridge. So I worked so hard to not go to where I could have gone with that. And she ended up getting $4,000 more for her car. They totaled her car. I mean, it's just like everything flowed so beautifully and so wonderfully. Like I just feel very protected. So instead of being fearful, now I feel protected. But I went back to that moment when I was on the phone with her and I was like, what is important here? You know, like what's really, is the computer stuff really that important? So it kind of helped me more prioritize my presence with people. It's like if I'm answering the phone, I better be present and not rushing you off the phone, you know? So yeah, so it brought me back to that moment of whoa, like we all kind of take for granted the preciousness of this life, you know?
You just gave me goosebumps when you were talking about that. You got a God wink, is what I call that.
Totally, totally. And it was not lost on me. Like I had class that night. I wasn't going to go. And I just kind of like sat and I was like, wait a minute, what just happened here? You know, she was protected. That's what just happened here. I don't need to be fearful about what could have happened. I need to feel really good and faithful about what did happen. And it was that
Yes.
feeling of protection, you know, crazy.
And it ended up causing you to have a higher awareness about the value of presence.
Yes. Yes. Which
Yes.
is one of my like hot buttons right now. Like I just want to be really present to life because if we're present to life, we're not missing things, you know, we're not missing that beautiful bird. We're not missing, I just feel like animals in nature is such a miracle. Like every day I go out into the woods and I just look for what I can find. It's like such a miracle to me. And my husband went out on the same trail yesterday. He went biking with his cousin and they saw a baby rattler. And I was like, no, I don't need that. Like, I'm good. You know?
You're like, all babies are cute except.
I'll go with the deer and the bunnies and the birds, but you can keep the snakes. You know?
So that's funny that you brought up that the presence is a hot button for you,
Yeah.
because it is a hot button for me as well.
Cool.
And it's getting hotter by the day, it seems like.
Totally. Like when
um,
that thing happened with that guy at the mail place, I got upset because I wasn't present. I went into another place, right? So if we're fully present, then all of us is here right now. Isn't that powerful? I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
no, you're fine. Even getting upset afterwards is not being present either.
So true. So
Yeah.
true. That regret, right? That regret is I'm in the past.
Well, and you're judging yourself now,
Yep.
right?
For something
So, and that's just the
I have
ego.
no power to change in that moment because it already happened.
Right.
So good.
So, so recognizing the different ways that the ego is trying to do its work of protecting you from change, because change represents unknown, and unknown is great fear and threat to survival, right?
Right.
That that is a terrific practice of being present and mindful of everything. And I use my body like a compass.
Okay.
So when I notice tension in my body, or I notice butterflies, or it seems like there's a shadow of anxiety happening, and I call it a shadow of anxiety because I can't really turn and see it, because every time I turn, it stays, or
Right.
I'm aware of it, but I can't see the source.
Yeah.
Um, it's because my ego is actively. So I just have learned that I can journal and I can meditate, and there are different things I can do to trace back the source of it. I told a friend she could move in with me when she asked, and it was total knee jerk, no thought behind it.
Yep.
And then I started having that anxiety, and I was like, "What is this? What is this?" I
Yeah.
didn't even realize it was because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat with it and I meditated, and I realized I just barely got used to being in my own space by myself and taking care of nobody but me. And I'm not willing to give that up.
Yeah.
So the next day, and of course, I wanted to think of an excuse,
We
because
always
that's the
do.
ego.
We always
Ego
do.
wants to protect me from that discomfort of being vulnerable and honest.
Is that right? Oh, that's interesting.
But I told her, I said, I've had anxiety since I told you you could move in, and it's because I don't want you to live with me. And I want to help you so you can stay for 30 days while you find a place to live. But you can't live with me because my anxiety is, I don't like this feeling.
Yeah, it's not
And
aligned, right?
I knew that I was risking the friendship,
Yep.
and it worked out.
Yeah. Did she end up moving in?
Yeah, she came in, stayed. She
Yep.
stayed for like 27 days, and she moved to a place that was perfect for actually her needs.
And you set the intention, and that's how it's done.
And it was my job to hold the boundary though,
Yeah.
because when it got to a certain time and she seemed to be moving more in and getting more comfortable, I
Yeah.
was like, the 30 days is up on, and I told her the date. I said, did you find a place to move yet?
Ah.
And she said, well, there's a place that I was thinking of. I said,
So
and
it's
she
not
was like, all right.
it's not just setting the boundary. It's not just speaking your truth, but it's holding to it, right? Not
Yeah,
letting
my
other people.
boundary is,
Yeah.
yeah, my boundary is my job. Otherwise, it's just a request, and I'm a victim to if they honor it or not. It
Because
is my job.
yes, because we allow everything, right? It's like when people say, "Oh, this person is disrespecting me or they're taking advantage of me." I always think, and this has been such a journey for me. I'm allowing that. I'm allowing that. I have to own what I'm allowing. And it is uncomfortable to put up boundaries and it could be confrontational and you might lose friends. I have recently lost friends because I just said what I needed to say. And if people can't handle that, then it's like, well, what kind of alignment is our relationship if we can't be honest with each other? Is it just, what are we doing here? Is it superficial?
So that's, yeah, these are along the same lines of the things that I'm learning as well.
Yep.
Um, I recently dated somebody for a couple months and I really like his energy and the connection was really good and he's smart and intuitive. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And then he asked me a question that I thought took a lot of courage to ask. And
Okay.
so I gave him an authentic, vulnerable answer. And it was through text. And he hasn't talked to me since.
Oh,
And
no.
that was like 10 days ago. And the ego, I'm like irritated. I'm angry. Like I took this chance and this is the feedback I got. And I thought you were different. And well,
Yep.
his responsibility does not lie in my thoughts and expectations.
No. No.
So, and then I got to be like, okay, this is my ego. I put myself out there and this is not
Yep.
obviously what he wanted. He
Right.
wanted to hear something different.
Right.
And I like talked myself down off that edge, emotionally, because it's just my ego protecting me from rejection. That's all
Yeah.
it was.
Yes.
And the thing is that if I can't be wholly myself, then there's no point anyways. So he did
Yeah.
me a favor.
Yeah. You're
If
just,
he's going to ghost me,
yeah.
I'm going to let him.
Yeah. My daughter always says rejection is protection. And I
Yeah.
that, but I also look very heavily at alignment and vibration. So if we are to say something that causes someone to go away, it's like it wasn't there was no alignment. The alignment wasn't correct. So you're right. You wasted a lot less time in trying to make something work that I think this happens a lot in relationships where people kind of, you know, kid themselves. Like they don't really look at, and I've done this in friendships for sure, where I'm just like, oh, it's fine. Like it's fine. I have fun with them, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, was there anything deep there? No, there wasn't. And I'm a deep person. If you're going to be friends with me, we're going deep.
Same. Same. I want intense conversations and intimate connections, and I want all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's touch souls.
Yes. I want to constantly be expanding and growing with you,
Yes.
or we're not going to stay in each other's experience.
So yeah, at the end of the day, I just told myself, even if I said something he didn't want, he could have said
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
something,
It could have came
even
back with something, right?
even like I tell people that try to pick up on me that I'm not interested in, I don't feel like we're a match
Yes. Yeah, that's pretty
because
cool. Yeah.
it's simple, it's easy, it's not accusatory, it's a nice way to
Yeah.
break
Not
that
not
tension.
ghosting someone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was not able to have the courage to communicate even that, I was like, he's not my person.
It's just it's a maturity level, I think, and And like you said, it's not operating from the ego, which most people are. And it's like they don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations or, acknowledge their truth.
Right.
Yeah, that's challenging. All right. So I'm going to see if this works. Let's see if this works. No, it's not working. I thought this, all right, wait, let's see. I'm trying. All right. Well, I'm just going to share that you can get in touch with Candy at www.elitesourcecoaching.com. I will put that in the show notes. So if you didn't get a pen and write that down, it will be in the show notes. But if you want to work with Candy, which I highly recommend, I think she's absolutely brilliant. I think she's got a giant bag of tricks. Like, I just think that you have an endless amount and you're always working on yourself, which I also love about you. It's like we can be coaches and we can be mentors, but if we're not working on ourselves, then we're working from the ego, right?
I agree with that. And
Yeah.
I want to say leadership of self, which is mean I invest in myself the same expectation, example, whatever that I
Yeah.
offer others. That is the leadership that counts the most. That is the light that lights the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think being in that position is just an honor and a responsibility. And I feel like you really live that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I
And
do my best.
yeah. And that's why I love having you on the show. All right. So let's talk about the 7 levels of mind. This is like
Okay.
this is so exciting to me. We've got quite a few minutes left. So I think we're going to be able to cover this, but let's just, breeze through and give people what is the 7 levels of mind?
So there's 7 levels of mind, and I'm not going to go through every level. I'm just going to talk about the surface level, which is like the ego protective stuff,
Okay.
and then the core, which is the very basic, that's our identity.
Okay.
And so, I'm an internationally board certified hypnotherapist, right?
Yes.
So what I do, I don't play with the core level because that is your job. But what I can do through hypnotherapy is use your language and your words, your intention, and adjust, make tweaks,
Mm,
implant seeds that come from you, not from me, into those other levels so that they trickle down and you're easier able to shift your own core identity.
wow. Wow.
So,
That sounds
right?
that sounds like a fast track. It really does.
It is a fast track. Um, yeah, I've seen some miraculous things happen with the people that I work with.
Mm,
I mean, like a war vet with night terrors now sleeps well.
I love that. That's amazing.
And he was very skeptical about it. And I was like, you know what? I've never done this before either. I will do it pro bono. Let's just work together and see
Try
what
it.
we
Yes.
create. And yeah, it only took like 6 weeks and there was a noticeable shift.
Wow, that's incredible. And a lot of that is like, people have to acknowledge. I think what happens a lot, especially with someone like a war vet, like a PTSD situation, it's acknowledging instead of like this whole trip of like mental illness and depression and being medicated to be okay. It's about really helping people to find out that nothing has power over them. Nothing. And
Right.
that's a massive undertaking for us to help people to experience, because once you let go of that grip, once you let go of that identity of, this is my inadequacies in my identity, this is the way I was born. When you start to help people to let that grip go, it's like anything is possible.
So the way that it worked for this person
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of interview process, right? And because I'm a master level NLP practitioner, I hear language differently. I hear word choices that are made versus other word choices that could have been made. So
Right.
that tells me a lot about values and beliefs just by languages being used.
Yeah.
So I was able to trace back what happened to him and what he made up about that confirmed a core belief he had about himself.
Already.
And that's why it was so prevalent and easily accessible for trauma and re-trigger trauma,
Yep.
because it aligned with the core belief he had.
Yeah, it solidifies it. Yep.
So then I was able to go back through the different levels of the mind and hypnotize him to see himself differently and hear himself being different, and what did it look like when those things shifted, and implant different images, and then he was able to shift that core belief out of that.
Wow. That is super powerful and amazing work. Like such amazing work. That's
But
incredible.
this is where self-sabotage comes from, because when we have that core belief, and nobody can change that but us,
Right.
it's
Right.
dangerous even for a hypnotherapist to be like, and you know that you can fly, whatever it is.
You
It's
get people in
dangerous to
trouble with
shift.
that.
Well, yeah, because identity is such a core thing, it can actually cause problems to address that. So that's a no-no. You
Yep.
don't do that.
Yep.
And so when we have these deep-seated beliefs, like I'm safe when I'm invisible, I'll use myself as an example,
Yep.
right? That's what I learned in childhood. So anytime somebody gave me acknowledgement for doing something well, that imposter syndrome would kick in,
Yep.
because they don't know I'm really invisible and powerless, right?
Right.
How dare they see me differently? How dare they see me at all? And then there's the panic and the anxiety that comes from that. And then there's the self-sabotage of, I get offered to be a public speaking engagement
Mm-hmm.
and I don't show up.
Right.
Like
Right.
literally physically don't show up.
Wow.
But I'm invisible, right? I confirm my belief.
Yes. Yeah. So even just like creating something in your experience to make it not possible for you to show up is part of
I
that.
sure did. That's what I did. Yep.
Yeah.
I cut my time schedule so close that I had gone to Seattle
Yeah.
and my flight was delayed and I didn't make it back in time.
And it makes so much sense, right? Like when you look back and you track it, it's like, oh, of course that happened because of what my core belief is.
Yeah, I was literally invited to be a public speaker at a conference in Vegas, opening for a big speaker on prevention of suicide.
Wow. I bet you that would never happen again.
Oh, it will never happen again.
Sometimes these learning things are really tough.
Really tough.
But it's also trusting that process, trusting that I say this to my kids all the time. It's like you didn't do it because you weren't supposed to do it at that time. Like just trusting that your process is important. It's more important than going and speaking at that event is for you to become aware of it so that you can actually address it and fix it.
And that is exactly where I arrived. Yes. That
Yeah,
is exactly what happened for me.
really. That's
It was a
fantastic.
valuable journey for me because I got to experience myself differently,
Mm-hmm.
and I started group therapy as a result.
Yep.
And the group therapy is interesting because it's online, but it's interesting how I can relate to something that each one of us is going through. And it's a small group. There's only 5 of us,
Yep.
and the group leader is in New York, and very hippie, very spiritual, very, and so he gets me in a way that people like you get me, right? But
Right.
people in the average world
Yeah.
don't understand what I'm really saying, the layers. And
Right.
he totally gets me. And he asked me some key questions that I was like, oh no, I'm still doing that invisible thing. I'm just doing it differently.
There's so many different ways to spin it, right?
Yeah. And it's so beneficial though. And if it hadn't have been for what happened, missing that speaking engagement, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have realized what was still hiding under the surface.
Yeah.
And now I'm fully aware and doing things differently at a bigger level.
And so often it has to come from like a really, really challenging thing like that, like a really like a wake up call, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because otherwise we just kind of like float through and it's like I often say there's a couple things. Like one, if if the energy is really dense, like things are really bad and they're just getting really bad, that usually means it's about to shift, because when things get really intense like that, that's when our desire gets super strong. So it's like
Right.
missing a speaking engagement like that is like, oh, I gotta fix that. I gotta figure this out because I can't do that anymore. Because if I'm in alignment with what I'm actually, my objective in the world is, which is to share this and to help as many people as possible, then I have to heal this and figure this out so that I can proceed with that objective.
That is exactly, yes. And it was the imposter syndrome that caused the self sabotage.
So let's talk about imposter syndrome a little bit for people maybe who have never heard of imposter syndrome. In fact, I was talking to my neighbor recently and she was telling me that um, I think it was one of her kids was talking to a university professor, and he said the number one thing in college that kids really deal with, that struggle with, is imposter syndrome. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that is?
So, imposter syndrome is when people see you differently than you believe yourself to be. And so, therefore, you feel like an imposter. And therefore, that usually will lead to sabotage behaviors to prove that your identity is right and everyone else is wrong.
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, when we're right, we're safe. That's why we all need to be right. So,
yeah,
when I was hand selected, I didn't even seek this opportunity.
yeah.
The imposter stuff just started firing right away because here I am thinking I'm invisible. And then somebody sought me out to be a speaker in Vegas at a convention for mental health
What?
professionals. I was like, how did this even happen? Right. Then I was like, yes. And I was so excited. And this is what I'm supposed to do. I want to do
Yeah, your
workshops.
higher self is like, yeah, let's go, right? Yeah.
And then my identity was like, no.
You don't want to do that. You don't. That's no. That's a no.
Well, what if I stammer? Because sometimes I get really excited and I talk fast and I don't enunciate clearly, and I need to practice that. I need to probably do this class first, and da 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 da. And what if I'm moving around too much? Because I used to stand perfectly still and talk, and then in classroom I learned I had to gesture and
Yeah.
do things to keep people looking at me.
Right.
And then I did a public speaking course for it was one day, and they said you move too much. I was like, so, anyways, all this evidence was coming up of why I was not going to do a good job.
Yeah. I call that paralysis of analysis.
Well, that's one way to. I did all the. I made my presentation slideshow. I did all the
You
stuff,
did it.
right? I
Yeah.
wasn't completely paralyzed. However, the sabotage started as soon as I started giving myself evidence of how I was not going to succeed.
Well, and you
And
paralyze the energy, right? Like you paralyze the energy to get you there, like that manifestation energy. So you manifest the event, but the man, like this wave behind me. So that wave doesn't get completed because you're not energetically in alignment with it. So it kind of paralyzes the energy field to get you to create, to manifest your true desire.
I will say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the importance of shifting internal belief systems so that we can vibrate higher and be in alignment.
Yeah. And to be
Yes.
honest with yourself, right? Like if you were at any moment to sit down and be like, okay, I need to journal about this. I need to like really get in touch with, what that doubt is. Cause I think a lot of times we kind of push the doubt away and we're like, no, 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 no. I got to do this. I got to do this. This is what I said I wanted to do. But that vibration underneath is what we're actually creating from. So if at any moment, if you had sat down and did your process of like, what the heck's going on with me?
I
Right?
agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But I pushed the doubt away and I didn't even acknowledge that I was thinking I was just being realistic with myself and telling myself what I needed to do to get better prepared.
Right. Right.
And I was not. I was creating a vibration of disalignment.
I love that. So that's a really good lesson in why sometimes your stuff might not manifest because you're not getting to those core beliefs.
Right.
Oh, that's so good. So when we're talking about
And that's what,
the levels and you're on the surface of this, and what is it that can help people, obviously working with you, elitesourcecoaching.com,
obviously.
but what kind of process can people to create more awareness around this in how this stuff may be actually showing up in their life? Like, even for me, I'm just like, these core beliefs are sometimes, and this is where we get into like the subconscious. And I just don't really love to believe that anything is hidden from me. I always feel like I'm on the trail all the time because I'm awake and aware. But how can
Yeah,
we be more aware to, is it just really acknowledging our feelings?
it's so much more than that. Your subconscious mind knows everything and remembers everything and has perfect recall if your conscious mind would get in alignment with that.
Yep.
Also, there's no filter, so it believes everything that you say and think.
Yep.
Therefore, using your language in a clean manner is the best thing you can do. Never use your language against yourself. And
Right.
I mean that absolutely. Never use your language against yourself.
We're,
Even if you make a mistake, you can be encouraging to yourself and say, well, that didn't work, so now what am I going to do? Well, I learned another way that didn't work. How can I do it different? Be encouraging, just like you would like to your own child.
child. Yeah. Yeah. I just thought
Okay, so
people I want to hear the show when you said that.
well, so this is going to sound like a shameless plug, but it's truth.
Plug away.
You can either go through years of step-by-step practice to get to where you want to go,
Hmm.
or you can hire one of the coaches and hire someone who's done the years of work to give
Yeah.
you the fast track.
Yeah, it's the fast track. And that's the thing about the fast track. And also just clarifying the blind spots, like, just, we all have blind spots. We all have energetic connections to things that we're not fully aware of. And when you work with someone like you and you can hear the words and you can feel the energy, it's just, sometimes it's harder for us to see it because we're so close to it.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's
Yes.
gaining
Well,
that new perspective.
I tell people all the time, a fish in the water is used to the water. It's not even aware that it's there because
It's,
it's normal.
yeah. Yeah.
And that is the benefit of having a coach, because the coach is like, hey, dude, you're in the water,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like people don't even know how miserable they are or realize that they don't have to be that miserable or have to struggle that much or have to have such a hard life.
or have a choice to become a flying fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Get
know,
out of the water. Get out of the water. I love that. That's great. I had another question. The 7 levels of mind. About imposter syndrome. So when we're dealing with that feeling of like, is that the ego showing up too? When it's like, you're really not good
so
enough to be doing this. What do you think you're doing? That's ego as well.
100%.
Okay.
Because when you have that core belief and you think you know a thing because you're perfectly safe in the victim mentality and being invisible, because that's what you learned and you survived this far, so you've got evidence, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of myself,
Yeah.
as soon as that happened and the imposter syndrome kicked in, that's actually my ego telling me, don't do it. It's risky. You
Right.
could get hurt. Don't
Right.
do it.
Right.
And then, when I didn't pay attention to what was happening, then I got to be right that I was invisible because I didn't show up at all.
Wow.
And then but I was safe, didn't take the risk. So yeah, it's all ego stuff.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
I learned a new way that the ego will protect me.
Which I love, which is so incredibly enlightening. Well, Candy, this is always just one of these conversations that I just want to just spread it to the world, which we are doing, which is great. But thank you for being on the show. I honestly can't wait to have you back. You can find Candy at elitesourcecoaching.com. We had Carrie Grant was on last week or 2 weeks ago. And, this is just a force. This is a force of people that is out for the betterment of the world. And I feel like just working in that arena, it's an arena, baby, like working in that you are source arena is just going to make the world such a better place. So I'm a huge supporter, a huge fan of all of you, and I'm cheering you on.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for being here. Well, guys, that is it for our show today. Thank you so much for being here. You can get in touch with Candy. I highly recommend it. And just be a force for good, because this world needs you.
I love that.
Ah, right. Have a great one.
You too.
Thank you.